Bosho Bushalo, 65, restaurant owner. These Europeans come here thinking they know everything, thinking they deserve the very best treatment, that they have the right to bombard us with questions that we're obliged to answer. On the other hand, they think that by giving us some tricksy name like travelers or Roma, they can put right the many wrongs they've done us in the past. Why can't they just call us gypsies and put an end to all the stories that make us look as if we were cursed in the eyes of the world? They accuse us of being the fruit of the illicit union between a woman and the devil himself. They say that one of us forged the nails that fixed Christ to the cross, that mothers should be careful when our caravans come near because we steal children and enslave them. And because of this, there have been frequent massacres throughout history. In the Middle Ages, we were hunted as witches. For centuries, our testimony wasn't even accepted in the German courts. I was born before the Nazi wind swept through Europe, and I saw my father marched off to a concentration camp in Poland with a humiliating black triangle sewn to his clothes. Of the 500,000 gypsies sent for slave labor, only 5,000 survived to tell the tale. And no one, absolutely no one, wants to hear about this. Right up until last year, our culture, religion, and language were banned in this God-forsaken part of the world, where most of the tribes decided to settle. If you asked anyone in the city what they thought of gypsies, their immediate response would be, they're all thieves. However hard we try to lead normal lives by ceasing our eternal wanderings and living in places where we're easily identifiable, the racism continues. Our children are forced to sit at the back of the class, and not a week goes by without someone insulting them. Then people complain that we don't give straight answers, that we try to disguise ourselves, that we never openly admit our origins. Why would we do that? Everyone knows what a gypsy looks like, and everyone knows how to protect themselves from our curses. When a stuck-up, intellectual young woman appears smiling and claiming to be part of our culture and our race, I'm immediately on my guard. She might have been sent by the Securitate, the secret police, who worked for that mad dictator, the conducator, the genius of the Carpathians, the leader. They say he was put on trial and shot, but I don't believe it. His son may have disappeared from the scene for the moment, but he's still a powerful figure in these parts. The young woman insists. She smiles, as if she were saying something highly amusing, and tells me that her mother is a gypsy, and that she'd like to find her. She knows her full name. How could she obtain such information without the help of the Securitate? It's best not to get on the wrong side of people who have government contacts. I tell her that I know nothing, that I'm just a gypsy who's decided to lead an honest life. But she won't listen. She wants to find her mother. I know who her mother is, and I know too that more than 20 years ago she had a child she gave up to an orphanage that she never heard from again. We had to take her mother in because a blacksmith who thought he was the master of the universe insisted on it. But who can guarantee that this intellectual young woman standing before me really is Liliana's daughter? Before trying to find out who her mother is, she should at least respect some of our customs and not turn up dressed in red if it's not her wedding day. She ought to wear longer skirts as well so as not to arouse men's lust. And she should be more respectful. If I speak of her now in the present tense, it's because for those who travel, time does not exist, only space. We came from far away, some say from India, others from Egypt, but the fact is that we carry the past with us, as if it had all just happened, and the persecutions continue. The young woman is trying to be nice and to show that she knows about our culture, when that doesn't really matter at all. After all, she should know about our traditions. In town, I was told that you're a Rome Barreau, a tribal leader. Before I came here, I learned a lot about our history. Not our, please. It's my history. The history of my wife, my children, my tribe. You're a European. You were never stoned in the street as I was when I was 5 years old. I think the situation is getting better. The situation is always getting better. Then it immediately gets worse. But she keeps smiling. She orders a whiskey. One of our women would never do that. If she'd come in here just to have a drink or look for company, I'd treat her like any other customer. I've learned to be friendly, attentive, discreet, because my business depends on that. When my customers want to know more about the gypsies, I offer them a few curious facts, tell them to listen to the group who'll be playing later on, make a few remarks about our culture, and then they leave with the impression that they know everything about us. But this young woman isn't just another tourist. She says she belongs to our race. She again shows me the certificate she got from the government. I can believe that the government kills, steals, and lies, but it wouldn't risk handing out false certificates. And so she really must be Liliana's daughter, because the certificate gives her full name and address. I learned from the television that the genius of the Carpathians, the father of the people, our conducator, the one who left us to starve while he exported all our food, the one who lives in palaces and used gold-plated cutlery while the people were dying of starvation, that same man and his wretched wife used to get the Securitate to troll the orphanages, selecting babies to be trained as state assassins. They only ever took boys, though, never girls. Perhaps she really is Liliana's daughter. I look at the certificate once more and wonder whether or not I should tell her where her mother is. Liliana deserves to meet this intellectual, claiming to be one of us. Liliana deserves to look this woman in the eye. I think she suffered enough when she betrayed her people, slept with a gadget, editor's note, foreigner, and shamed her parents. Perhaps the moment has come to end her hell, for her to see that her daughter survived, got rich, and might even be able to help her out of the poverty she lives in. Perhaps this young woman will pay me for this information. Perhaps it'll be of some advantage to our tribe, because we're living in confusing times. Everyone's saying that the genius of the Carpathians is dead, and they even show photos of his execution. But who knows? He could come back tomorrow, and it'll all turn out to have been a clever trick on his part to find out who really was on his side, and who was prepared to betray him. The musicians will start playing soon, so I'd better talk business. I know where you can find this woman. I can take you to her. I adopt a friendlier tone of voice, but I think that information is worth something. I was prepared for that, she says, holding out a much larger sum of money than I was going to ask for. That's not even enough for the taxi fare. I'll pay you the same amount again when I reach my destination. And I sense that for the first time she feels uncertain. She suddenly seems afraid of what she's about to do. I grab the money she's placed on the counter. I'll take you to see Liliana tomorrow. Her hands are trembling. She orders another whiskey. But suddenly a man comes into the bar, sees her, blushes scarlet, and comes straight over to her. I gather that they only met yesterday, and yet here they are, talking as if they were old friends. His eyes are full of desire. She is perfectly aware of this and encourages him. The man orders a bottle of wine, and the two sit down at the table, and it's as if she'd forgotten all about her mother. However, I want the other half of that money. When I serve them their drinks, I tell her I'll be at her hotel at 10 o'clock in the morning. Heron Ryan, journalist. Immediately after the first glass of wine, she told me, unprompted, that she had a boyfriend who worked for Scotland Yard. It was a lie, of course. She must have read the look in my eyes, and this was her way of keeping me at a distance. I told her that I had a girlfriend, which made us even. 10 minutes after the music had started, she stood up. We had said very little. She asked no questions about my research into vampires, and we exchanged only generalities, our impressions of the city, complaints about the state of the roads. But what I saw next, or rather what everyone in the restaurant saw, was a goddess, revealing herself in all her glory, a priestess invoking angels and demons. Her eyes were closed, and she seemed no longer to be conscious of who she was or where she was or why she was there. It was as if she were floating and simultaneously summoning up her past, revealing her present and predicting the future. She mingled eroticism with chastity, pornography with revelation, worship of God and nature, all at the same time. People stopped eating and started watching what was happening. She was no longer following the music. The musicians were trying to keep up with her steps, and that restaurant, in the basement of an old building in the city of Shibuya, was transformed into an Egyptian temple, where the worshippers of Isis used to gather for their fertility rites. The smell of roast meat and wine was transmuted into an incense that drew us all into the same trance-like state, into the same experience of leaving this world and entering an unknown dimension. The string and wind instruments had given up. Only the percussion played on. Athena was dancing as if she were no longer there, with sweat running down her face, her bare feet beating on the wooden floor. A woman got up and very gently tied a scarf around her neck and breasts, because her blouse kept threatening to slip off her shoulders. Athena, however, appeared not to notice. She was inhabiting other spheres, experiencing the frontiers of worlds that almost touch ours, but never reveal themselves. The other people in the restaurant started clapping in time to the music, and Athena was dancing ever faster, feeding on that energy, spinning round and round, balancing in the void, snatching up everything that we, poor mortals, wanted to offer to the supreme divinity. And suddenly, she stopped. Everyone stopped, including the percussionists. Her eyes were still closed, but tears were now rolling down her cheeks. She raised her arms in the air and cried, "When I die, bury me standing, because I've spent all my life on my knees." No one said anything. She opened her eyes as if waking from a deep sleep, and walked back to the table as if nothing had happened. The band started up again, and couples took to the floor in an attempt to enjoy themselves. But the atmosphere in the place had changed completely. People soon paid their bills and started to leave the restaurant. "Is everything all right?" I asked, when I saw that she'd recovered from the physical effort of dancing. "I feel afraid. I discovered how to reach a place I don't want to go to." "Do you want me to go with you?" She shook her head. In the days that followed, I completed my research for the documentary, sent my interpreter back to Bucharest with a hired car, and then stayed on in Shibuya, simply because I wanted to meet her again. All my life, I've always been guided by logic, and I know that love is something that can be built rather than simply discovered. But I sensed that if I never saw her again, I would be leaving a very important part of my life in Transylvania, even though I might only realize this later on. I fought against the monotony of those endless hours. More than once I went to the bus station to find out the times of buses to Bucharest. I spent more than my tiny budget as an independent filmmaker allowed on phone calls to the BBC and to my girlfriend. I explained that I didn't yet have all the material I needed, that there were still a few things lacking, that I might need another day or possibly a week. I said that the Romanians were being very difficult and got upset if anyone associated their beautiful Transylvania with the hideous story of Dracula. I finally managed to convince the producers, and they let me stay on longer than I really needed to. We were staying in the only hotel in the city, and one day she saw me in the foyer and seemed suddenly to remember our first encounter. This time, she invited me out, and I tried to contain my joy. Perhaps I was important in her life. Later on, I learned that the words she had spoken at the end of her dance were an ancient gypsy saying. Liliana, seamstress, age and surname unknown. I speak in the present tense because for us, time does not exist, only space, and because it seems like only yesterday. The one tribal custom I did not follow was that of having my man by my side when Athena was born. The midwives came to me even though they knew I had slept with a gadje, a foreigner. They loosened my hair, cut the umbilical cord, tied various knots, and handed it to me. At that point, tradition demands that the child be wrapped in some item of the father's clothing. He had left a scarf, which reminded me of his smell, and which I sometimes pressed to my nose so as to feel him close to me. But now that perfume would vanish forever. I wrapped the baby in the scarf and placed her on the floor so that she would receive energy from the earth. I stayed there with her, not knowing what to feel or think. My decision had been made. The midwives told me to choose a name and not to tell anyone what it was. It could only be pronounced once the child was baptized. They gave me the consecrated oil and the amulets I must hang around her neck for the next 2 weeks following her birth. One of them told me not to worry. The whole tribe was responsible for my child. And although I would be the butt of much criticism, this would soon pass. They also advised me not to go out between dusk and dawn because the Sindvari, editor's note, evil spirits, might attack us and take possession of us, and from then on our lives would be a tragedy. A week later, as soon as the sun rose, I went to an adoption center in Shibiyu and placed her on the doorstep, hoping that some charitable person would take her in. As I was doing so, a nurse caught me and dragged me inside. She insulted me in every way she could and said that they were used to such behavior, but that there was always someone watching, and I couldn't escape so easily from the responsibility of bringing a child into the world. Although, of course, what else would one expect from a gypsy? Abandoning your own child like that. I was forced to fill in a form with all my details, and since I didn't know how to write, she said again more than once, "Yes, well, what can you expect from a gypsy? And don't try to trick us by giving false information. If you do, it could land you in jail." Out of pure fear, I told them the truth. I looked at my child one last time, and all I could think was, "Child without a name, may you find love, much love in your life." Afterward, I walked in the forest for hours. I remembered many nights during my pregnancy when I had both loved and hated the child herself and the man who had put her inside me. Like all women, I dreamed of one day meeting an enchanted prince who would marry me, give me lots of children, and shower attentions on my family. Like many women, I fell in love with a man who could give me none of those things, but with whom I shared some unforgettable moments, moments my child would never understand, for she would always be stigmatized in our tribe as a gaje and a fatherless child. I could bear that, but I didn't want her to suffer as I had suffered ever since I first realized I was pregnant. I wept and tore at my own skin, thinking that the pain of the scratches would perhaps stop me thinking about a return to ordinary life, to face the shame I had brought on the tribe. Someone would take care of the child, and I would always cherish the hope of seeing her again one day when she had grown up. Unable to stop crying, I sat down on the ground and put my arms around the trunk of a tree. However, as soon as my tears and the blood from my wounds touched the trunk of the tree, a strange calm took hold of me. I seemed to hear a voice telling me not to worry, saying that my blood and my tears had purified the path of the child and lessened my suffering. Ever since then, whenever I despair, I remember that voice and feel calm again. That's why I wasn't surprised when I saw her arrive with our tribe's Rom who asked me for a coffee and a drink, then smiled slyly and left, The voice told me that she would come back, and now here she is, in front of me. She's pretty. She looks like her father. I don't know what feeling she has for me. Perhaps she hates me because I abandoned her. I don't need to explain why I did what I did. No one would ever understand. We sit for an age without saying anything to each other, just looking, not smiling, not crying, nothing. A surge of love rises up from the depths of my soul. But I don't know if she's interested in what I feel. Are you hungry? Would you like something to eat? Instinct above all else. She nods. We go into the small room in which I live, and which is living room, bedroom, kitchen, and sewing workshop. She looks around, shocked, but I pretend not to notice. I go over to the stove and return with 2 bowls of thick meat and vegetable broth. I've prepared some strong coffee too, and just as I'm about to add sugar, she speaks for the first time. No sugar for me, thank you. I didn't know you spoke English. I almost say that I learned it from her father, but I bite my tongue. We eat in silence, and as time passes, everything starts to feel familiar to me. Here I am with my daughter. She went off into the world and now she's back. She followed paths different from mine and has come home. I know this is an illusion, but life has given me so many moments of harsh reality that it does no harm to dream a little. Who's that saint? She asks, pointing to a painting on the wall. Saint Sarah, the patron saint of gypsies. I've always wanted to visit her church in France, but I can't leave the country. I'd never get a passport or permission. I'm about to say, and even if I did, I wouldn't have enough money. But I stop myself in time. She might think I was asking her for something. And besides, I have too much work to do. Silence falls again. She finishes her soup, lights a cigarette, and her eyes give nothing away, no emotion. Did you think you would ever see me again? I say that I did, and that I'd heard yesterday from the Rome Barreau's wife that she'd visited his restaurant. A storm is coming. Wouldn't you like to sleep a little? I can't hear anything. The wind isn't blowing any harder or softer than before. I'd rather talk. Believe me, I have all the time in the world. I have the rest of my life to spend by your side. Don't say that. But you're tired.